Okay, I think most of everyone is here. This morning's success was during the group photo. Nobody fell into the fountain. So that is already a success for the day. So thank you for being on the right side of the fountain. So that's already a big success. Okay, so our first session is called Circular Economy 101. And as I mentioned earlier, we invited you to answer the pre-event survey, and we asked, how would you define circular economy in your own words? And these are some of the definitions that came out. Nothing is wasted. Circular economy is about reduce, reuse, recycle, renew, refurbish. Resources are maximized and waste is minimized, and everything can be seen as a resource. And finally, maximizing resource and utilization and reutilization. We also asked the room, what is your confidence level or your current assessment of your knowledge of circular economy? And the average score that came out was 2.8 over 5. So hopefully by the end of the training, we can see an increase in that general knowledge or that average knowledge. So for this first session, which is Circular Economy 101, by the end of the session, the participants must be able to define the concept of circular economy as applied in the different sectors that you're working in. Not just waste and recycling, but let's say in water, in urban, in transport, and the other sectors. For our DMC participants, we hope that you are able to define you're able to understand the basic concepts of designing circular policies and nationwide programs. And for our ADB staff, for how you can integrate basic concepts for designing circular projects. So our first speaker to kick off our session, our first session, is James Baker. James Baker is a senior circular economy, climate change, and plastics recycling professional, specializing in applying industrial scale solutions to address ocean and land-based sustainable development goals. James is responsible for leading ADB's regional marine plastics reduction program and supporting the operationalization of Strategy 2030 Operational Priority 3. He's also responsible for supporting country programming and sovereign and private sector project teams to identify and promote circular economy activities within their programs and investments. Let's all welcome James Baker.
Good morning, everybody. And before I sort of go into this presentation, I'd like to welcome you all back. We had a meeting, I think, in this room 12, 18 months ago, where we had our development member countries, and we had some staff. And we all hoped that we would start to learn and see circular economy becoming more mainstream. And I hope that, this training session over the next few days and this year is a demonstration of that progress. We've now got a huge number of staff from ADB in the room. We have a lot of good friends here from developing member countries who we've built relationships over the last few years as part of the TA. We have ongoing relationships, ongoing projects. We're very, very lucky to be joined for this training session by professionals who are actively implementing circular economy projects. When we did this 12, 18 months ago, we were all talking about how we were going to do it, and we hope to be able to draw on colleagues' experiences, on government experiences over the next few days of how it's actually happening, how it's actually working. And one of the efforts we've made in selecting our speakers, in selecting our participants, is looking at people who are actively working in circular economy projects. They are at the rock face, as it were, working at how to make it work. So we have come a long way in 12, 18 months. We've got a lot further to go, but I think we're doing very well. So let's start to look at Circular Economy 101. And I do apologize to everybody because we've seen this a lot, but it's worth going back over to look at what we think about a circular economy, how ADB thinks about circular economy, how the industry, how research looks at circular economy, and some of the opportunities and ways to think about it. So a lot of us think about circular economy as local, as materials, what we call materials, components, and products. So these are the single-use plastics, the plastic bottles, the thin films, the stuff that we see every day. And working at city, provincial level, the waste management stream, how we control plastics. But circular economy also can look, and I think more importantly in the future needs to look at this much larger macroeconomic opportunity, where we bring together the pillars of sustainability, the social, economic, technological, and environmental perspectives. And as we go through this presentation, as we go through this training for the next few days, we're going to start to think about how we take circular economy beyond single products, how we take policies, how we take enabling environments, how we take our thinking beyond just a single value chain. And as we go through this, please ask questions. As we get to the end, as we have our discussion sessions later in the day and tomorrow, actively talk to people. We have a lot of knowledge in the room now as to how this works. But we want to look at that larger process, that larger policy, so that as we go forward with policies, as we go forward with investments, we can have that greater impact on holistic sustainability. So, the circular economy gives us the tools to tackle climate change and biodiversity loss. It gives us power to grow prosperity, jobs, resilience. One of the challenges of circular economy is that we are essentially destabilizing mature markets. A lot of the linear economies that we've seen have taken decades to develop. They're very stable. And there is a concern with circularity that as we start to make changes, as we start to make investments, it can destabilize. It can have an impact on industries, it can have an impact on jobs, and it can have an impact on entire economies if we get it really wrong. So again, as we start to look at this, think about those emergent phenomena. Think about how a decision related to plastic bottles or a decision related to bioorganic fertilizer may impact other areas beyond that. We can draw an example from the Philippines. So we look at Laguna Lake, we have issues of siltation, we have issues of fertilizer runoff, we have issues of fish farming that are then going into water quality and then reducing the ability of that water to be used as abstracted for human consumption. It's not a single value chain. It's holistic. It's several different aspects, several different sectors, all impacting one decision, one project. So people say, oh, we can't, one thing you hear is we can't recycle our way out of this. We can't recycle our way out of the plastics problem. And this is essentially true. There is a huge amount of plastics out in the environment. We have to look further upstream. Recycling is it's a solid access point. It is allowing us to move tonnage. It is allowing us to address materials in the environment. It's allowing us to divert materials away from the environment. But as we think about our circularity, we think upstream. How do we avoid those plastics in the first place? We've done a lot of work on our bioplastics. How do we avoid those fossil fuel plastics? The Global Plastics Treaty, how do we avoid plastics in the first place? How do we stop those getting in? So you start to think, we've already got that link between agriculture, food production, food waste, bioplastics. How could that work in your country? We have the marine debris policy-based loan. How are we influencing much larger sections than just a single product or a single component? And how do we build that as we design policies, as we design projects? And how do we reach the scope? What are the project boundaries? What is a step too far? What is a sensible step from the core project? So as we said, we are looking at the guiding principles, clients, ADB Strategy 2030, our sectors, which are well represented here. Thank you everybody for coming, taking the time. I hope it's positive for you. But it's the integration. And one of the observations for the Sustainable Development Goals is that they have not progressed as well as they could do because they are addressed in isolation. The real success for Sustainable Development Goals can come from integrated projects. Now that works on two levels. It's not necessarily just an integrated project. It's a complex project. It's a bigger project than we typically look at, but also in capturing the metrics. One of the problems that we have, one of the issues that we have is we look at a project, we look at the financial return, we look at the social return, and other aspects are considered as safeguards. But as we design projects, as we design policies, start to think about how we capture different metrics, how we capture different impacts that are beyond what is immediately tangible, what is immediately recognized. Think about that next step, and we can start to increase the impact of the work we do increase the impact of our investments and our policies. So as we start to look at that, we have examples here of energy projects integrated with climate change, integrated with digital, water, urban, nature-based solutions. How does energy integrate with nature-based solutions? It can be biomass. It could be algae being used as a CO2 scrubber for a power plant. Urban development, we've got Terry here from Urban Development. Nature-based climate change, using trees, using forested areas to control temperatures in urban areas. Using nature-based systems for stabilization of watercourses, stabilization of banks, management of flooding, designed flood meadows, returning of areas of river basins to flood control. These are all part of a circularity. They're all part of a systems approach. We use circularity, circular economy. In a way, you could almost use it as sort of a catchphrase. It is a brand. But if you start to think about how systems work, how systems integrate, that's where we can think about our design, we can think about our risk management, we can think about our policies. And the more you think about it, the more you see these different links, bio-based circular economy, so you're using wood in construction industries. It's an old technology, but using bamboo, using activities like that, we can look at that for construction. But we also have to think about what's a step too far. There are some logical steps from our core project, but you don't want to make it unnecessarily complex, unnecessarily challenging. But I think as we move forward, as we learn, we need to think about those next steps. How do we go that a little bit beyond to get, magnify, multiply our impact? So, as we say, an umbrella term, brand. So it's a full range of sustainability. I mean, somebody asked me this morning, what's the difference between circular economy and sustainability? The reality of it is, there is not a difference between circularity and sustainability. Circularity is thinking about systems. It's thinking about how sustainability interacts through a value chain. It's an easier access point to think about the circularity. We can all think about a plastic bottle going around in a circle. It's used as a part, it goes into the waste management, it's recycled, it comes back to being a plastic bottle. But as we start to think about systems, I encourage you to think beyond materials and components. Think into natural systems. When we were at school, when we were young, you learn about the carbon cycle, you learn about the water cycle. These are all opportunities for us at ADB in developing member countries to think about how circularity can go beyond plastics, how systems management, systems dynamics can be applied to these larger concepts, these larger constructs. And it's that fundamental sort of approach from individual projects to programmatic. And one of the things you need to think about is as you are developing projects for circularity, it might not achieve circularity in a single project. It may be that you design a project, you build a project this year, but in 2 or 3 years' time, ADB or the World Bank or a private sector invest in a project that completes the circle. And it's that time-based thinking that we need to sort of get involved with. We need to understand the concept. It's not a singular point in time. Some of them are, but these larger systems are thinking about it into the future. What can I build today that will allow circularity in the future? We had a presentation with a transport team to how do you build circularity into roads, make the conduits bigger, make the center lane stronger so that it can take bus traffic. It's a relatively small incremental investment, but it prepares that road for a future opportunity to be more sustainable. Just takes us to take a step back, think about the projects we do, think about what it is and how we can improve it, how we can make those integration points for future development, for future integration, whether it's within that value chain or external. So this is starting to look at some examples of this. So we have multiple financing solutions. A lot of these complex projects, we're talking about methane from landfills. Some aspects of that are private sector. The private sector is very comfortable with it. Some aspects of that have to be sovereign, particularly around the risks of remediating landfills, managing landfills. And as a government, you're starting to look at how can we support, how can we share that risk, how can we share that opportunity to address these legacy waste problems. It's not just about future waste, it's about legacy waste. We all unfortunately suffer from large tonnages of landfill waste, large tonnages of industrial waste, post-industrial sites that continue to impact human health, continue to impact natural health, nature systems. How can we address that as we do these new projects? How can we take it to that next stage of complexity? And typically we don't like complexity. My colleagues from risk management, they don't like complexity. They like it to be simple. But as we do this, the integration, we have to take a little bit more of a step. We have to be a little bit more adventurous, go a little bit further. And I've got to give credit to Peter for helping us with that. You took a big leap with us for Alba, Peter, and I appreciate that. But it can be done. If you look at it, you understand it, you can do it. You see here we have these, a wide range of climate adaptation, circular plastics, digital solutions. Talk to your colleagues, talk to people around. And in government, think about how your different ministries work together. How we can work across ministries, how we can integrate that work across silos, across boundaries. And again, we see healthy and age-friendly cities, but it's the same set of solutions. It's the same set of cross-sectoral activities, decisions, interests, opportunities. Think about it. Think about how it works together as a government. Think about how you can enable that, how you can make it easier for developers, whether it's ADB, whether it's private sector, to cross those bridges. So, risk management and balance, and this is where we're starting to talk about how far do you go? So if we build an energy project, we think about an energy project, but can we go into nature-based solutions? Can we go into climate control? Can we go into urban development? Can we go into district cooling? Can we go into water treatment? What's a logical step and what's a step too far? So start to think about that systems dynamics. What are the scopes of your project? We want to try and expand it from where we are, but not too far. We have to think about that. And that is a fluid concept. It's a fluid idea. One project will naturally lend itself to a much bigger, more complex activity. Some others will, perhaps only be one or two logical steps. But as we start to think about natural solutions, we start to think about increased sustainability. We start to think about how can we blend that private sector, that sovereign investment, what are the interactions? We're looking at using the best financing, the best proponents to achieve what we need to do. And this is where we get into this sort of complex value. And typically, we can value economic very easily. Social can be valued, it's a bit more challenging. Environmental valuation is still new. How we understand environmental systems, how we value environmental systems and environmental contribution. It's work that ADB in our environment team is doing at the moment. We're understanding how that can progress, but also think about it in terms of your government, in terms of your country. How can we look at that environmental contribution? Can we lend against that environmental contribution? Can we use that to mitigate risk? Can we use that to improve the loan rating, to improve the interest rate, because we are seeing that benefit and we're valuing it successfully? Typically environmental impact for a long time has been safeguard, but if we can start to make it into an active contributor to the viability of the loan, to the viability of the project, then it's a solid step and it's a solid use of circularity systems understanding. So as we start to look, project officers designed for circularity. So you start to think, as I say, you have typically, we think about a silo, we think about a road, we think about a power plant, we think about a social project, we think about an urban project, we think about a landfill project. How do we go to the next step? How do we think about, so for example, we are managing, we've put a bus system in, but we are using biogas created from cattle manure to generate the biogas. We're already doing that. A lot of the work that we were thinking about is already being done, but we're not necessarily recognizing that or capturing it. And when you have that 2.8 out of 5, I think you're all underselling yourself. You don't, you say, oh, I'm not comfortable with circularity. You're perhaps just not thinking about it in the right way. As you start to think about it, this is stuff that is already out there in projects. It's already out there in invested projects. It's already under development. Whether it's DMC, ADB, it's already out there. Eco-compensation, how can we start to use environmental services to provide value into the projects? How can we capture, how can we provide better gender accessible jobs? And one of the activities we're looking at is with digital solutions to provide quality jobs, to provide cash flow, to provide wages. This is all circularity. Don't get hung up on plastic bottles. There's a massive amount. Think about systems. Think about how they integrate. Think about how you can use that to increase the impact of your project for relatively small steps. So then we talk about policymakers, design for circularity. How can you enable that? How can you help us to support these projects, invest in these projects? So start to think about the challenges of policy. A wonderful example is the Basel Convention on transboundary waste management. At the moment for the Pacific region, that is essentially killing circularity, because you can take a plastic bottle to an island, but you can't bring a waste plastic bottle back from an island. So that is an example of a very effective international agreement that is actually stifling circularity in that position. One of the challenges I think we all see is different ministries within a country. Some ministries are very supportive, some ministries are more difficult to access. They perhaps don't talk to each other. How can you look at the systems within a city, within a national government, within a province, to increase that conversation, increase that information flow, ease that information flow, so that your different silos of government ministries, government control, flow more easily together. It's something ADB did last year as part of our new operating system. We try to take down our silos. We try to be more integrated, and I think the representation here today is demonstration that that's working. Think about that flexibility. How do we make it flexible for the future? It has to be as detailed as possible. It has to be legal. It has to be, but think about the language. Think about the flexibility, and think about building it in. And that's both for policy and for project design. Think about it at the beginning. Try and build it in. Relatively small incremental costs that in the future develop, offer huge benefits for us. So that is enough of Circular Economy 101. I hope that sort of quick run through was interesting, useful. Anna, keep us out of trouble.